Chris, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How is it going to work? Can we ask questions during the presentation or?
Yeah, so both of these meetings are really kind of less about presentations and more about you asking questions and being able to answer. I want to be able I think the goal is if you have questions that and answers that you would like the council to know, they're going to see this video. If there's statements that you want to make, just trying to give everybody an opportunity, because I still don't know if they're going to try and hold this on the 19th. I'm hoping not. We're having our goal setting session that night, so I want to try and keep the two separate. So if that's the case, then it would move to the first meeting in November, and it's a one and done meeting. So I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard, especially if they can't be there.
Okay. What do you mean by a one and done meeting?
So that adopting the plan only takes one meeting, one vote. An ordinance takes 3 meetings, 3 votes. So 3 separate meetings, but this resolution approving the plan only requires 1 meeting and 1 vote of the council. That makes sense?
Yeah, and it's just like the simple majority kind of a vote?
Yep. Not to complicate matters, unless the mayor were to happen to veto the adoption, then it requires 4 of them to override the veto.
Oh, okay.
But otherwise, it's just a simple majority. So it's 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. I have one in the waiting room, but it looks awfully suspicious to me, so I'm not going to admit them. If anybody has anybody that reaches out to them and say, I can't get into the meeting, will you let me know? It just, I'm trying to avoid doing it this way, making sure that we don't have another school incident.
23 students home from Albernet Community Schools for COVID
Really?
infection from Friday's night game. You're muted out in there, right?
All right, will be if you want me to.
So we have about 17 participants. I would just ask that you try and stay muted until you want to ask a question or want to enter into the discussion. If you want to ask me a question, there is a chat feature at the bottom. If you don't want to ask the entire group or kind of have it come as anonymous, you can chat directly with me. But again, this is the second session. Thank you for everybody that is here tonight. I see some familiar and some new faces from the last meeting that we had. Really, these sessions are fairly loosely put together. It's as I told Susan before we got started. It's really about allowing you to ask me questions. The plan itself is basically, let me back up. The plan itself is on the website. So if you do want to ever take a look at it, it's about 90 some pages. Beyond that, as I was saying to Susan as well, I don't know yet if the council is going to hold a vote on this on October 19th or the first meeting in November, and it'd be the first Monday of the month, and I'm not sure what that date is quite yet, but this is the approval process is twofold. So approving the plan is the first step. That is the policy statement. And once that's adopted, then the door is opened to approve a new set of, basically a new overlay that would go into the zoning code. That's stage 2, and there would be at least a month and a half and 3 separate meetings plus another planning commission meeting that would need to occur for that to be approved as well. But once the plan is approved, it's a little difficult to go back the other direction, if that makes sense. So the plan is still a vital piece of this puzzle. But really, like I said, this is an opportunity. If you have comments and don't believe that you'll be at a council meeting, those are in person. You know, there's a number of different things that you can do. If you don't want to be at the meeting and want to express specifically to the city council, you can write a letter. You can drop that off to me and I read it into the record as part of the public hearing. You can reach out to them directly. They have email addresses on the website as well. Just kind of an overview from the last meeting. A lot of the discussion that occurred at the last meeting came from questions that you may or may not have or answers that you may or may not want. So really, I do want to go ahead and open the floor. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just unmute your mic and ask me a question, and I'll answer it the best of my ability. If there are any documents that you would like to see, please shoot me an email. My email is on the website as well, along with my cell phone. You can shoot that over to me and I will get that information to you as quickly as I can. So with that, any questions to start or comments?
Barb is trying to join the meeting and she was removed. So perhaps she was the person that was
She was. Yes. So my suggestion would be, can she call in from a phone?
I will text her and I'll ask her to do that.
Okay. It, like I said, if she asked, it came across as a really suspicious lead in. So I tell her I apologize.
Yeah,
So I'm
she was
gonna,
removed. Oh,
well,
Chris, can you walk me through finding the information on the city website?
yeah, so let me just pull that email or that. So the difficulty that I have with our city website right now is I put all of the major announcements on the front page. So if you go to the front page and you scroll past the COVID, derecho, mask use, there is it's like the last Iowa Department of Public Health link. Right below that, you will see US Highway 30 Master Plan. And then if you click on the link, it will take you to that master plan. And like I said, it's about 90 some pages.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris, may I speak for a moment?
Yes, absolutely.
So my name's Stan Crocker. I've been living in Mount Vernon. My wife and I have been living in Mount Vernon for about 16 years now. And before that, we were visiting for 5 or 6 years on a fairly regular basis. So we have seen how we got to see how Mount Vernon was evolving even before we moved here. And certainly in the 16 years since, we've seen extraordinary things happen, particularly with the uptown neighborhood. And so, we recognize what it is that is giving so much vibrancy to this community, what it is that's pulling in commerce from outside areas, including surrounding states and cities, and what it is that is basically the economic engine that is pulling in that commerce and making Mount Vernon an extraordinarily exceptional place to live. And so there's a question coming out of this, but first it's just a comment, and it's something you and I have talked about before, and I just would like the opportunity to bring it up in this public forum, that I'm very concerned about the fact that the people that drive that uptown neighborhood that have been creating all that commerce and energy for us that has led to the festivals, which again create more commerce and energy, that those people have been left out of the process here. I'm not suggesting that it was done deliberately by anybody, but the fact that it happened is evident to almost anybody that has paused long enough to look at the last couple of years of this process. And so, I'm concerned that the people that have invested so much of their time and energy and money, a lot of money, a lot of sweat, were left out of this process for 2 reasons, or at least a couple of reasons, or maybe more. But I'm concerned because they've, somebody who's invested in my own company and knows what that's like to put both time and money into something. I recognize that there's people all up and down that 3 or 4 blocks of Mount Vernon who are fearful that they're going to lose their investment of time and money, and understandably so. And but equal to that is that if we're not careful, we're going to lose the uptown neighborhood, which is going to make Mount Vernon a drastically different place than the one that most homeowners in this, that are here now have invested in. We've seen what happens with the Walmart effect. That's one concern. I know there's an argument that we're not allowing a footprint for a large Walmart, but I keep an eye on the Walmart story long enough and aware of it from all of my travels around the country. I'm aware of the penalty of not being, on top of that company and not being aware of the damage that they will do to a community in their lust for profit. By the way, I say that as a capitalist, that and a business owner. I've got nothing against them making profit. I have a lot against the way they do it, and the process that they use to drive down the competition when they move into the periphery of a community. And so I'm concerned about all that. I'm concerned about the investment that these people have made. I'm concerned about what will happen to Mount Vernon if we allow a certain type of growth on the edge of the community, in which we see a pattern that is consistently visible to us around North America. Like I say, I travel a lot for business. I've seen the effect. I've seen towns, college towns, university towns that have been negatively impacted by bypass growth. I've seen both with and without Walmarts. It can be devastating either way. Walmart almost guarantees the loss of a downtown area, center area. I'm concerned about my investment as a homeowner. I'm concerned about the quality of life should I choose to stay here. I'm concerned about all that, but taking it back to the original comment, I'm really concerned that the people that are driving all that have been left out of the process. And so my question is, how are we going to circle back and get their very important input into this process? There's a lot that they can bring to this conversation. And like I said, I'm not saying anybody did it deliberately, but I don't think anybody would challenge me on the suggestion that they were indeed left out. Anybody that was at those meetings that looked out into the audience would have noticed the absence of everybody from Bauman's Clothes to the Lincoln Wine Bar to Fuel to Polly's Antiques, all of that. That whole area was just left unrepresented in these conversations. And as a homeowner and a resident of nearly 20 years, I'm really concerned about that.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this, Dan, and you and I obviously disagree with one another.
I didn't think we did, actually, but go ahead.
We do. I mean, you presented a couple different theories as far as how that occurred. There were uptown businesses that were present at both of those meetings by their own admission at the last public meeting we had. But as far as circling back, I think this is the council's, at least, they slowed down and you're giving everybody an opportunity to speak and comment. As far as the plan is concerned, they can still make changes to the existing plan to a certain extent, but it's not likely that they're going to start back over. It would require a new investment to do such. But, again, 2.5 years, and we've had over 7 to 8 public meetings, and it's been in the paper quite frequently. We went back and looked at the paper. So it has been out there. It's not like we intentionally did this, and we did this on purpose, knowing that this was going to be a huge issue and a huge point of conversation in the community. That's the reason that we started so long ago, and why we took the extra steps and actually added meetings into the consultants' pro forma, basically, in order for them to come here and have more meetings. And they did. They had private meetings on top of the public meetings, especially with landowners. So there was a lot of opportunity, and I think the realization that not everybody had an opportunity to speak is why we're here tonight, and why last week or previous Monday, we held a forum, and the council has seen all of those comments as we videotape this, and we're actually, this Zoom is being recorded, and they will be able to watch that as well. So, that's just my explanation. And like I said, you and I we agree on
I don't
some
think we
things.
disagreed that much, Chris, because at one point you did say that you would be willing to, that you would actually welcome a pause, as have several council members, and welcome a pause that would push this into a time period that would be post pandemic, which I thought was a welcome comment from all of you. But I would also, I want to, as long as we're referencing the conversation that you and I had downtown or uptown, I'd like to revisit the part, that where we were just talking about the fact that I ran into you that day because you were going from business to business, talking about the consequences of the P&Z proposal, and I wondered then, as I still wonder now, why you didn't go business to business each time something of importance happened during the last 2.5 years that you're referring to, you or somebody representing you. I think it's concerning that nobody, we're all neighbors here, and we all know each other, and we all know when somebody's missing from the room. How is it that nobody looked around the room and said, we're not being represented here by any of these business owners, or any of the building owners for that matter? We haven't even talked about that part, but the people who've invested a lot of money in rehabilitating those businesses, whether they're business owners or just simply building owners. It's like, I guess I'm just saying, it's like, yeah, I look through the paper too. I always feel like the Sun does a really good job of getting information out there. I've also been very concerned that I don't think enough people subscribe to the Sun. And I worry that word was not getting out for that reason. But as for the reason that the people that should have been there and best represented there missed it, there's a whole list of reasons that have nothing to do with whether it's getting publicized in the Sun or not. And a big part of that is just the amount of work that goes into trying to drive a business in a town of 4,000 people in the center of town. There's a lot of work. You're not doing an 8-to-5 job. These people are working 12 and 14 hours a day to keep these businesses going. And then on top of that, they have life. All the other things that we deal with as we go through our life experiences. So there's a whole lot of things at play here, but really, like I said, I don't even think it matters so much why it happened. I think that there's probably very reasonable situations that could be summed up that would explain how an important group of people missed this meeting that was going to affect them so very much. And that's really all we need to know, is that they missed it. So how do we fix that?
What I was referring to, Stan, and before I want to clarify something, I said I welcome the pause. Never once did post-COVID come out of my mouth.
Well, I'm sorry if I misrepresented you. I'm glad you clarified.
But I do, again, if the council did pause, and then they established these two meetings because they were set to vote on this almost a month ago. But again, I want to clarify something.
Well, you did I'm sorry. You did state though that you would be the happiest man in the room if this was pushed into February or March.
No.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Heard it from somebody else too, but go ahead.
Stan, and this is my point, is I'm welcoming the communication back and forth. I don't need the snippy comments, and I disagree because that didn't come out of my mouth. I did say that I welcome a pause.
Yeah.
I also said that it would be up to the council if they decided to go back any further. However, I did not say that I would willingly wait or want it to wait until February. My point to you was that I doubt any development will occur prior to February, because it starts to get cold and they simply don't start pushing the development window at this point in the year. So if they don't, if they did push it off to February, that would be okay. I do have plenty of stuff on my plate,
Well, that's the
but I just
part
want to
of
make
the-
sure that we're representing, certain things can mean certain things the way that they're portrayed. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that's not exactly the way that I stated it.
Well, you did state that you had an awful lot of other important things on your desk, like COVID and the pandemic and the derecho. And I do remember you referring to spring, and maybe you referenced it being, pushed to spring in some other way. And maybe it was what you just stated now, that the developers themselves might push it into spring. But I do think that that was a good thought. And I was actually trying not to be snippy with you, but to compliment you on being willing to slow this process down, as I've heard from, like I said, as I've heard from other from council members as well. It was praise, Chris.
And I
Sorry.
appreciate that. Like I said, my point from the very beginning has been, and I did say this at the last meeting, there is no imminent development that is occurring. I have received 2 phone calls, one from what I would expect right along the bypass, and another from an individual that took one look at this and goes, oh, I don't know if I want to adhere to those rules. And I said, well, then I don't know what to tell you. So, and I do, I want to reiterate, I have a lot on my plate. If you can't see my desk right now, which is a good thing. That's kind of an everyday occurrence, but definitely, I mean, it really is a council directive, and the reason that these are being recorded and shown to the council is so that you can put the information in front of them, or the request the information that you want in front of them, and they can see that, prior to the public hearing as well.
I just
Hey,
want to,
Chris?
Yeah.
This is, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt anybody. This is Rich Herman. I'd like to say a couple words.
oh, yeah, go for it.
Go
Rick.
ahead. Oh, yeah, so I just want to have a couple comments on the whole thing. I don't really have a question, but I would like to interject a few things that, so probably 10 years ago, I was involved with the community development group. I'm the president right now with the Main Street organization. I was one of the representatives on this whole process, and I thought it was a really solid, good process to go through. I mean, and I had the best interests of our Main Street in my mind every time I was involved with anything to do with the bypass. All the way from the aesthetics, how much land is going to be for commercial use, how much the green space is going to be, the mixed use, the buildings, all the stuff that, to me, it was inevitable that the growth is going to take place down there. And to me, it seemed like we wanted to shape our future. We should be in front of this so that when it does happen, we can control it, so that we can maybe shape it a little bit so that we don't hurt or harm our uptown businesses. And here's the reason I say that. If you look at the basic principles of Main Street, it says that you need to nurture and grow your downtown area as much as possible so that other areas can flourish in your city, which means housing, other businesses, schooling, anything else that goes on. It's like, it's the seed that grows and blossoms, and it becomes a very nice thing for a community. And there's no conflict having other businesses in other parts of the city. I mean, that's one of the basic tenets of the Main Street organization. And so I never saw a conflict in that. And then when I saw the plan and, had some input into it, realized that there are a lot of really strong things in there and language in there that's going to help us protect our uptown businesses. And as a consumer, a personal consumer, not speaking on behalf of CDG, we don't have everything we need on Main Street. And so I welcome the fact that maybe we can grow a little bit in a very controlled, organized manner. And I think this plan does that. So I'm going on record to say, as a person, I approve of this plan. I think the process was very solid. Now, we're going to talk about this in our community development board meeting in the future, and to see where we stand on the whole thing as a group. But right now, I just don't see what the big problem is.
Can I
And I
speak?
know, Stan, about the Walmarts and all that kind of stuff. I understand that, and that's why we need a plan to protect ourselves from that stuff. And I think this plan does a good job of doing it.
Can I speak?
Tommy, you had something?
Well, I disagree with you, Rich. When I think about the festivals, for instance, in this town, the 15 festivals that we host, those festivals exist as a result of a thriving uptown. And many people who work to make them happen. But the P&Z members, the council members, your families, your friends, the people that come to Magical Night from all over the state now, that wouldn't happen if we had empty buildings, that housed half of Main Street. And the more I've had time to really think about this, my feelings are hurt a little bit. The uptown business owners do work hard. My shop is open 72 hours a week. Those are the hours I have a cell phone on my hip prior to COVID. COVID has given us challenges every other week. We're adapting. And what hurts is that 3 P&Z members saw a way to try and protect uptown businesses. And 4 of them did not. And why? I mean, I just am sort of flabbergasted as when there is a way to try and protect us, that this community wouldn't step up and do that. They all reap the benefits of how hard we work uptown. And it's hurtful. And I thought of something, Chris. I'm just curious. I remember saying at the meeting the other night that you would man up and say that the retail piece of this plan was your idea. And
No, before you go any further, Tommy, it wasn't my idea. I voted, I recommended. I will say that I made a recommendation to P&Z as staff, because that's all public, that I recommended that it be in there. But again, staff is the lowest on, but it wasn't necessarily my idea to have retail in there. It was just, when we got done with the plan, I felt the plan was strong enough that we made the recommendation from a staff level to the council or to the P&Z members that the retail be in there. Because again, that's what we heard.
yeah, so this is my question to you though. So this was what, probably 3 years ago, 3-ish, 2.5. And at that point, you'd been a resident of Mount Vernon for 2.5 years. And I'm just curious if at that point, if you really knew the scope of the history of the town, of what this town has accomplished in the last 15 years as a result of Joe Jennison and uptown businesses and festivals, and Matt Steigerwald, putting us on the map with the Lincoln Cafe, and Chalk the Walk was, a boomer for us. And I just wonder if I'm curious if you feel at all differently now, having heard all of us be so passionate about how Mount Vernon is an anomaly in this state. And I have to, I do disagree with Rich. And also, Deb, to you, I think it was a huge conflict of interest that you spoke out in favor of moving forward, being more forward thinking at a P&Z meeting wearing the role of a council person.
That is
I
not
think a
the
council.
case. And I very much
think-
said, Tommy, I
In
have
the paper.
all of my regard under the context of being an independent citizen. I was very, very clear.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I don't think you, Deb, I don't think you get to do both. I think you need to choose. And
No, I don't
also-
need to choose, Tommy. I am a citizen of this community,
know.
just like all of us are.
You are a council person, and I think as a council person, you should have an open mind and not have your mind made up. Your job as a council person is to listen to your constituents. And
I
and
agree.
you are.
I agree. And I was not speaking as a mind made up. And I really don't wish to argue this point right here, but I would like to be very clear that I was very clear when I stated what my challenge was. Is I stated that as a citizen, not as a council member. I was very clear in that meeting. And the reason I was in that meeting, it was a public meeting, and I can go to that as a citizen, just like everybody else on this phone can go. I wasn't there to lurk and try to sway opinions. I had no voice at the table. I want to be clear, and I want to make sure that you have the facts.
Well, no, you can.
Yeah, but it did happen right before a vote, I have to say, and I was very uncomfortable reading about it in the paper.
Tommy, so I don't want to get this off track. I mean, these are the comments. If you want to direct them specifically to a council member, then I would
Okay, that's fine.
come to either in writing or at the public hearing.
Yep,
To
and
answer your question.
Okay.
So I need to clarify one thing, because this document, the line that you're referring to, at least the 3 planning commission, you have to understand that it only protects half
I know.
of the businesses in the downtown.
I
That's
understand.
number one. Number two, as I stated at the last meeting, I work for 4,500 people. I have to take that all into account. So that's the reason I pointed out, if you look at the plan on page 8 through 10, there were on average 40 to 50 people at those meetings. And if you look at the charrette, or what came out of the charrette, retail was one of the biggest things to come out of that. So if you're asking me, do I still support the plan? The answer is yes. The other question that I want to make sure you understand too, Tommy, is I also see investment in the downtown as key to making sure that both continue to thrive. And so for me, being the city administrator here, it is my job to continuously put programs in front of the city that will continue to help the businesses downtown to thrive. There are a number of factors that go into why downtowns succeed and don't succeed. And the lack of investment is probably towards the top. And as I pointed out at the last meeting, there are some programs that I found just in doing some of this research that I would like to explore, but I don't think they've ever been done in Iowa, and I don't know if we can legally do them yet. But, again, I told everybody at both meetings, this is my professional opinion as a certified planner. Does that mean that I should have the final say? Absolutely not. That's why we have a city council and a planning commission. But to answer your question, yes, I would still recommend the plan. I would also recommend
Recommending the plan.
investment in the downtown.
What about recommending the plan minus the concerns that Trudy raised? Because that is how we reassure our business owners uptown and the building owners uptown.
But again, I want
And that's how we
to
keep
reiterate,
them-
Susan, half of them, not all of them, half of
I
them.
know that. I know that.
I'm talking, I want to make sure, Susan, it's half. It's not all, it's half.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I
Even
don't
with that line that's in there that Trudy put. that wanted to keep in there, it would still only protect half of the downtown business owners.
Chris, can you explain that comment? I don't know what that means.
So as of right now, restaurants, coffee shops, trying to think of some of the others. Those are the two main downtown businesses that can actually locate out on Highway 1 and Highway 30 right now. So you can see some of that effects with Hardee's and Subway. Those businesses that own or operate out of those businesses could operate out on the bypass today in the general commercial. So the plan doesn't necessarily make any changes to that. The other one that was brought up to me previously was grocery stores. So another grocery store could go out on the Highway 1, Highway 30 bypass as well. It just hasn't. But all of those are allowed under today's standards.
Thank you. Also, I had a question, one for you and maybe one for Rich. You mentioned that more retail was needed, and Rich alluded to that we don't have everything we need. Could, instead of the generality, could you maybe speak to what retail and what we don't have that we need? I'm just curious what people have been saying that we need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so some of the things that people have talked to me about, and I personally experience, sporting goods, hunting and fishing. I had to go to Cedar Rapids to buy some new tennis balls recently. Home furnishings, things that aren't antiques, like more of the, modern looking things, lamps, end tables, rugs, things like that. If you're not looking for an antique thing, that's missing. A lot of parents, young parents, tell me that we're missing clothing, kids, all sorts of kids stuff, not just clothing, but other things that related to, the younger crowd. Electronics, you have to get stuff online. Anything that has to do with photography, which I love, is not there. Bookstores, people, the last time we did a survey, they said that a lot of people said, oh, wish we had a bookstore here or something like it. And then there's missing restaurants. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, there's a lot of things, and we're landlocked with Uptown. We have a certain number of places that people can physically have a business Uptown. And if you want to limit that,
Like you're proposing a
and
wall.
never grow that or never try to do anything with it in the city, then I think we'll be in trouble in the future. And I'm just saying, personally, I think the plan went through a good process. There are some strong things in there to help protect our Uptown businesses.
No, thanks. I just had not heard a list yet. I had only heard the generality of retail, so I was curious what
Denise, the
that
other
was.
thing
So
that
thank you.
I would also reach out to Joe Jennison. So I want to say almost two and a half years ago, they had an outside study done through CDG. I think with help from Main Street, Iowa, but there was an expert that came in and they did a kind of a question and answer. So there is a document that was produced as well. So Joe might have that, and it pointed to some specific uses that were not necessarily downtown or Highway 30, Highway 1 based. It was more, what are we missing in Mount Vernon, or what would people like to see? So that's another document that I would probably point to that Joe has that might present some of that information as well.
Right. I think that meeting actually was the one that was in our building when we first bought our building. I'm not positive, but I think that was where I think the only thing that came out of that was shoes. And I know Bauman's has, of course, added some lovely things since then, but I think that was the only thing at that meeting. It still was the generality of retail. So I'm pleased to hear Rich kind of maybe list off some additional things. But yeah, I think that, anyway, maybe other people remember that meeting, but I think that's all that was listed. I know Mike Smith was there and we were like, well, we have shoes at Bauman's. I know it's not extensive though, or wasn't at that time.
So Denise, I would encourage you to reach out to Joe, because there's been a couple different versions of the survey that Chris is referring to. And I think a lot of us who have been involved in the Main Street organization in Mount Vernon have been part of that that survey over time. I do know that there was one in 2016. I think it was refreshed later on after that. So I would encourage you to reach out to Joe.
Well, this one would have been in later 2017 because we bought our building in
And
2017.
that's probably
so,
the yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I have a question for Rich Herman. You mentioned that there are some things, I think you said there are some things in there that protect the uptown retail. Can you tell me what those things are?
So I think he's on mute. I can hear him talking. I'm sorry, I'm not sitting by.
Hello? Oh, sorry.
Rich,
I think,
I have a question
yeah,
for you.
sorry.
You mentioned
Yeah,
that,
no, I heard you.
oh, okay, sorry.
I was just on, I forgot to unmute myself. So the way I understand the plan is that there's material requirements, aesthetics, and some very specific square footage things in that plan that most of the chain retail places probably would not want to touch because it might cost too much money. Like for instance, I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. I have no idea for sure, but like a Dollar General, they probably won't be able to afford to put up a place in Mount Vernon because we have some very strict design guidelines, and the material requirements were a little above standard, right? They're there. The reason we put those in there, I think, is because we wanted to keep the aesthetics of Mount Vernon and the town and the historical look and feel of that whole place. Of this, I mean, we try to protect that piece of it.
That I'm aware.
Yeah, so I mean that's when I say that I think that there is limited amount of land, and the fact that you put on the building requirements and the materials that are going to be a little more high end, I think that's going to filter a lot of people out. I really do.
Do you think that a town of 5,000, granted we have a college here, say a sports, I'm just curious, a sports store, independent sports store opens up, do you think they can compete with Shields and Dick's, which are, 20 minutes away?
No, probably not.
Of electronics, clothing, photography.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a very good question. And I don't think that I don't think a business like that would survive. And that brings up another point that I was going to make earlier, was about the money is already gone when it comes to online sales. I mean, and all that kind of stuff that's been happening for years. So I just don't see, as a Main Street group, we will continue to focus on the uptown businesses and all the events and everything that we've been doing. Our mission will not change one iota because of this bypass plan. Because we know that is the heart and soul of Mount Vernon. That's going to continue. But you can't stop growth. All you can do is shape it and hope that you've done the right things so that you can control it. And you can get the businesses in there that people really want that's not going to compete directly with Uptown.
Well,
who knows if that's going to happen, but that was the intent.
Well, I guess, I'll go back and say it one more time. So, what Trudy and two other P&Z members were trying to do was to protect half, even if it was a quarter. I mean, I said this at the last meeting, I want to make it known again. This does not this would not exclude a coffee shop from going. This is not about fuel. Any coffee shop right now, with or without what Trudy had to say, has the ability to, we are not part of what would be taken away. Mount Vernon works. Mount Vernon has become, and it is, a national treasure, what it is as a result of all the things that have worked together. And I know that you firmly believe that adding retail and strip malls with a beautiful front brick facade, is going to add to the charm. And I just need to say I wholeheartedly disagree. I've yet to see where both can exist in a town our size. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I just want to make one more comment. I mean, Tommy, I mean, you know, I love you and your business and Mount Vernon. Like, you know, we've been here 15 years and it's been the best place in the world to live. But the one thing I want to say is that if there isn't some kind of a plan or some kind of an overseer to that area, we might be in a situation where some company comes in and buys the land and just builds whatever the hell they want.
I'm not
I
saying
mean, it could happen.
the whole
So
plan.
we can't stop that.
No, I know
So-
that. I know that. I'm talking about Trudy and Trudy's proposal to the P&Z. That's what I'm talking about. That protects competing retail businesses.
Can you, I'm not aware of Trudy's proposal. Can you tell me what Trudy's proposal was?
So if you look at the plan, it's page 86. And there is a line in there about 2/3 of the way down the page where it talks about uses. So you have uses on the left side, and then you have basically a table where it has a P or a C in it. The line that
Chris, do you think you could share your screen so then everyone can just see it?
Yeah, can you give me just a second and I'll
That
pull
would
that.
be easier so then everyone sees exactly what you're talking about.
Let me get to that page. So give me just a second and I'll show you.
Um,
No, you're unmuted.
while we're waiting for that, could I just say, Rich, that your comments about what people are looking for out on the bypass. As I said earlier, I travel a lot for business. Most of it's metro areas, you know, of any size, from Cedar Rapids up to, you know, New York, like the style populations, but also a lot of towns the size of Mount Vernon, because I do a lot of work with at colleges and universities. And so I got a pretty good sense of what's working and what's not working on the edge of some of these smaller towns. And I'm just not seeing the things that you were saying that people are looking for out there. Those businesses aren't interested in getting on the edge of a town like Mount Vernon. Walmarts are, and Targets are, even if they're the smaller footprint, but they bring in some very unfortunate practices when they do it. But these other businesses like sporting goods, things like that, they're not coming to places the size of Mount Vernon. More importantly, they're more and more, they're not coming anywhere. I mean, they're just all online. And I think the idea that we're going to see those sporting goods stores and things like that you're referring to popping up out on the edge of town is maybe just a bit idealistic and hopeful. And that people are going to still be driving 18 minutes into Cedar Rapids or 25 minutes into Iowa City to make purchases like, you know, soft, you know, like sports, and stuff like that, clothing.
So that's a good point. So Stan, what kind of businesses do you think would show up there?
You know,
I mean, are they? I mean, that's the hard part, right? We don't really know. I mean,
yeah, I don't have a personal opinion on what should be going out there. I mean, if I did, I would probably lean towards the people that I came across that said that they thought from the P&Z meetings that they had been to, that it was going to be light industry out there with agribusiness. I heard a lot of people talking about their understanding that it was going to be businesses like, I'm sorry, what's the name of the one out on the edge of town, the farm out on the edge of town that does farm to table.
CSA.
Morning Glory.
CSA kind of businesses. I thought that was extraordinarily thoughtful and forward-thinking planning. Fortunately, it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely
happening. But I heard that from a lot of people, that they thought there was going to be light industry and agribusiness with that farm to table CSA concept.
And
I thought
there
that
is.
was. I wish it was.
I think
gonna be-
I want everybody to know there is, and that is part of the plan. It's just on the south side of the bypass.
Right. I understand. Yeah.
So I'm going to try and share my screen real quick. Let me just do this real quick and well, that's not what I wanted. Try this again.
Chris, can I just say one last thing while you're looking? The point I was going to make is that those businesses are not going to be coming out there. The ones that people were asking for, Rich, in your report, just probably aren't going to show up out there. What I'm seeing in small towns across North America is exactly what we've got here in Mount Vernon. That's what people are trying to do. That's what people are trying to get to. Unique individual businesses that are not tied into chains. And some of these communities are succeeding at it, and some have not been able to make a go of it. I think Mount Vernon is unique in that our uptown neighborhood is so very successful with non-chain businesses that are doing well, that are succeeding. And I think that we should, our first focus on any kind of planning should be just about supporting them. I mean, first step in the thing is what's working already. Let's not let that go away. And unfortunately, the people that are driving that neighborhood are feeling like right now, they're feeling under attack, and they're feeling like they're going to be forced to go away just because of actions that have already been taken and actions that are being talked about.
I will talk about that in just a minute, Stan, but can you see page 86, the draft?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
So this is the line that Trudy asked to have removed. Only, I want to preface this, you have to strike grocery store, bakery out of there because those are already allowed uses within that district. So what she was asking was to strike this entire sentence, and then I would have had to move this and this to another category. But the pharmacy, drug, office supply store, clothing or department store, or similar retail use is what Trudy originally made a motion to approve the plan, striking that particular line. That failed. That motion failed on basically a 4-3 vote. And then the same four that voted against that motion made a motion to leave the plan in place as is, and that motion passed. So everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna stop sharing and come back. Here I have been in public sector business as a planner, as a certified planner this is my 20th year. The issue, and everybody is making a lot of good points, but the issue really is it's a moving target. My job is to look out for the next 20 years and see how to best plan the community so we're not reacting all the time. The driving factor behind what will drive retail in and out of a business is all about population and market share. Many of the operations, either retail, restaurant, chains mostly, they have a specific set of criteria that they look at, and the community has to meet that before they'll allow a franchise or one of their businesses to come in. So one of the concerns is the bypass is now there. I mean, this plan probably doesn't have to or may not be as important without the bypass, but bypass is constructed, so it does put pressure on. there are willing landowners that are going to sell property. If we don't adopt the plan and put some fairly extensive requirements in there, what you see now is what you're going to get, and it's a continuation. And I can assure you, again, you know, I've had 2 in the last 3 weeks call and ask me about those general areas. So the pressure will be mounting as we see more housing. You know, I know this isn't an argument that everybody wants to hear, but the community thrives on property tax. And until the state changes that, we have to have some growth in the community in order not to burden everyone else. So there's going to be some growth. And I think the good thing about Mount Vernon is we can tend to limit that because of our elevation changes and the difficulty with utilities. So there are things at our disposal, legal means, like this plan and utilities, that allow us to allow growth basically in a much different manner than what you would say if you went to one of the larger cities in Iowa. So I don't want to offend, and I have a lot of friends in North Liberty and Coralville both, but I can tell you that both of those communities had no plan, and that's what you are seeing as a result. This plan, regardless if that statement stays in there or not, if the council decides to keep it or not, does make it more difficult for individual businesses to come in. And I can't remember who brought up the strip mall. I mean, part of this is designed not to allow those types of strip malls. I have had one national chain reach out to me, and as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, in the last week, and was very disappointed with what we were proposing. He asked me if I had ever done this before, if I knew what I was doing, and when we talked about my background, he was even more upset. So this is the case. I mean, that is a case where this is exactly what I'm wanting, because I don't want to see a metal framed building with a brick facade that you can see from all the other sides, a yellow sign, and we end up looking, you know, this is the thing that I talk about all the time, is there's nothing wrong with the businesses on Highway 30, but they do look like a lot of places in Iowa. And
Chris?
Yeah.
This is Mike Smith. I want to say something when you're finished.
Okay.
I thought I saw a break there.
So that was my thing, is these are legal means in which I know that I can contend with and battle with larger companies and hold up in court. And so that's my job, is to make those recommendations. The council has the ability to, again, remove some of that information or make changes, and we'll see what they plan to do. Mike, go ahead.
Well, if not the senior guy on Main Street, I've certainly logged a lot of time on Main Street. And I want to take offense with with one thing you said. First of all, we do have a plan in place. Mount Vernon has had a plan in place for a long time. We've put a lot of thought and consideration by people to put this plan in place. That's one thing that I disagree with you on. Second of all, Rich, like someone said earlier, if there was a way that these businesses that you mentioned that people were asking about, if there was a way for these businesses to make a living in Mount Vernon, they would already be here. We've had some of those shops over the years, and they just didn't make it. Now, I know that I work for a lady who, if she thought that we needed sporting goods, or she's really stepped up to the plate in the last year, I think you could talk her into putting sporty goods in. I think you could talk to her maybe a photography type thing. There are places on Main Street that would entertain some of these businesses. Now, they couldn't be their main business. There's no way in the world they could be their main business, but maybe they could carry some things that people are looking for. I know that someone mentioned children's clothing. Well, we've gone down to much smaller sizes than we ever have, and that's a direct response to what people are looking for. But just to say we need more retail and you start mentioning things, there has to be a way for these to be profitable. And quite frankly, some of those things just aren't going to be profitable. One thing that I've been involved with 3 or 4 of these conversations throughout the years, and we've even brought in consultants that have given us ideas about how to expand retail, but they all, every single one of them says, your retail district should be downtown. That's where it should be. And yes, it's very important that we bring in new retail. Of course it is. There's not any of us that are disagreeing with that. What we are saying is we think it should be on the main street where the rest of the retail is. And that's exactly what every consultant would say. They said it's important to bring in new retail, but even more important is to make sure you retain the retailers you have. That's the number one thing every consultant has ever said to us. And I'm really concerned that, sure, we're making the guidelines very, very difficult out on the highway. I get that. But somebody's going to go in there, and let's say we limit it to 15,000 square feet. He's going to put in a 15,000 square foot building, and then he's going to rent out sections at 2,000 square feet to 7 different customers that compete directly with what we've got going on downtown. And I just don't know that that's what we want to do. I think that's how the whole issue isn't about retail on the highway. It's how we want our community to look. And I think our community looks better when retail's on the main street. Quite frankly, I think our main street looks great when there's no empty buildings. I've been in this community when there's empty buildings. It's not a pretty sight. It's not a pretty sight, I'm here to tell you. So we've got to do everything humanly possible to make sure we do that. And to roll the dice and to allow retail on the highway is a grave mistake. I'm here to tell you. I've talked to people from all over this country of ours, and every one of them says to me that we get this conversation going. How do you do it? How does Mount Vernon do this? And I say, well, we've had great thinkers over the years that have made very good decisions. Some decisions I didn't agree with, but as I look back on them, were the right decisions. This does not feel like one of those decisions that's right to me. It feels wrong. And do we really want to roll the dice? And just as an example, do we realize just how dangerous it is if, say, a Tractor Supply, a Farm and Fleet, one of those stores came to town? That would take a big shot at Bauman's and a monster shot at the best hardware store any small town could possibly want. Is it worth the rolling the dice to do that? Adding retail by subtracting retail. I think we better be careful about that. Now, Deb and Rich, you know how much I like you guys. We're just on opposite fence of this issue. And I've got Anamosa to prove my point. I've got Tipton to prove my point. That's just around here. All the towns on Highway 30 had clothing stores at one time, had retail stores at one time. And, you know, I just think we're making a big mistake. Thank you.
Chris?
Yes.
This is Barb Neal. I finally got on, so I don't know what all you've talked about. May I speak?
You may.
Okay. First of all, I have a question regarding the tax base. If you had, how many businesses do you need, or how many private homes do you need to equal each other? So I'm saying is if that was developed into residential instead of business, what would be the tax effect?
So I will try to put this in really simplistic terms, but it's a little bit more complicated than this, but I'll do my best. So if you want to, I'm going to do nice round numbers just because it's easier.
Sure.
If it were $1 million business, for instance, let's just say one building is $1 million. So given the size of the new dentist office that went out there, give or take between about $750,000 and $1 million is what that building costs to construct today. Okay.
Right.
That one building, which sits on about 1/4 of an acre, give or take, between 1/3 and 1/4 of an acre,
Yeah.
pays taxes on, if it's $1 million, they pay taxes on 900,000 of it. So they pay the same tax rate, but they pay on 900,000 versus the 1 million.
So they're paying on approximately 90% as opposed to, say, 50%.
Correct. So houses in general typically have to get to the 300,000 plus mark to
Right.
kind of break even on them as far as services. So it's a tricky thing to talk about because residential houses tend to use more city services than commercial buildings do too. So it's not a dollar for dollar thing, but on your residential house, if you have a $250,000 house, yeah, you're paying taxes on about 125,000 of it.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that was my question, but I do have a couple points I'd like to make, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you've already discussed this, like I said, because I just now got on. But that when they were putting in the bypass, many times the DOT went to Lisbon, and they wanted to know where Lisbon wanted an exit ramp coming into their town. This was discussed, I know, several times. And the decision was made, I thought it was by vote, but I don't know for certain how the decision was made. But they said they did not want an exit ramp on Sutliff Road, the most logical place to bring people into their town. So what happened? They were bypassed, and now they're upset because they're not getting traffic through their town. They cut off their nose to spite their face. So this is one of the things, my points, when I say I think it's a mistake to do this at this time. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good idea at some point, but to make a decision like this, which is so huge and has such an impact on the entire community, I think it would be like Lisbon deciding not to have an exit ramp. I think if the decision gets made, it will be regretted. Maybe there will be good things to come from it, but I think one of the things that I've heard repeatedly said, not just by you, but by other people that have said, you know, we're hoping that by putting these parameters on there, that we will discourage people from coming into the town. We're hoping that this will make a difference. We don't know for sure, but this is what we hope. And I think what the city and what the people are saying, and I might be mistaken, but I think what they're saying is we want a definitive rule. We want something that is more than just wishing, hoping, thinking, praying, whatever you want to say. I think we want something that we can say, this is going to have the effect on the community that we want it to have. We don't want something that's going to go out there and then potentially be able to be worked around and turned into something we don't want. The third thing I wanted to say, and then I will let somebody else talk, is Solon is paying close attention to Mount Vernon. If you go down to Solon and you drive out toward the lake, go down their main street, they've done some significant building. They are really, in my opinion, trying to emulate what Mount Vernon has. I don't know that they're going to achieve it, but they did manage to woo the Lincoln Wine Bar away from us. and things like that. I mean, we have, or not the Lincoln Wine Bar, excuse me, the Lincoln Cafe moved down closer to Solon. And I know it's close, it's between Solon and Iowa City. But my point is, there is competition for us if we don't get this right. There are other towns that are trying to emulate us. And I think it's pretty critical that we get this right. And if we're not ready to make that decision at this time, that it's going to be a right decision, then I think this needs to be slowed down. I think it needs to wait. This is not something that needs to be decided in a month, or I think there needs to be more input put into this. So that's my statement.
And if I just want to clarify, when I say hope, Barb, is I never talk in absolutes. In my 20 plus years experience, money always ends up talking in the end. So one of the things that
I realize you can't talk in absolutes, Chris. I do appreciate that. But my analogy of this is, if I were to say to my children when they were young, I sure hope that they're going to want to follow my rules. That's a pretty wishy-washy statement. And having them comply with my rules is far less effective than if I had something definitively said to them that this is the way it's going to be. Do you see my difference here?
I do, and I think
so,
that's the complication that we're dealing with today.
Exactly, it is the complication, and that's why it's so imperative that we not move rashly. It is imperative that we have lots of input and lots of, that we make the right decision. And maybe the right decision is what you're saying. But I feel like we haven't been convinced that it's the right decision. And so I think that's why there's such trepidation about this, because we just don't feel confident that what is going to happen is in our best interest.
And like I said, I'm not trying to disagree with that. I'm just saying that when I deal with things like this, it's always, it rarely is it a 100%, 80%, it's usually somewhere between 50 and 60%, and somewhere between, 40% one way or the other. So we knew, like I said, the reason we started 2.5 years ago was because we knew that this was going to be a topic of conversation. I will tell you that, there has been input, not very much on these meetings themselves. They send emails separately, but of support of it. So I think that's why I continue to tell people, if you have a strong opinion, kind of why we're doing these meetings tonight, you need to make sure that the council hears them. Because they're the ones that are going to ultimately make the decision.
That is true. That is true. But I'm fearing that, yes, you started this a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, it's human nature that we typically don't pay a lot of attention, especially if it's not really put in our face. And this was a lot of behind the scenes conversations going on. There were public meetings, I realized, but people don't really get engaged with things until it affects them personally. And so to say, well, we've been working on this for 2 years, that might be true, but the people are just now really becoming aware of what has been going on over the last 2 years and where this is going. And now the people are saying, wait, just let's understand this a little bit better. Don't just shove this down our throats, as much as please be clear with us and justify to us why this is a really good idea.
I would like to make a comment as a person who has been involved in these discussions. maybe not as long as Mike has, but for a while. And I just want to point out that we do have a plan in place. So I think we are protected while we think about this. It, and
I want to, can I stop you right there? Because we're not. I
Okay.
do want to tell you that we are not protected with the current plan.
in which way, just bring me up to speed here. In which way are we not
So
protected?
the current plan, hold on just a second. I'm going to share my screen again. I have to get to the page. I apologize.
Is it because of the new land between the town and the highway?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, but the bypass itself brings a whole nother element to it. So is everybody seeing a map with 4 colors on it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the current plan. All of this is general commercial. So for those that said it was just business park on the south side or around the bypass, that's not true. This is the current plan right here. All of this red, both on the north side and south side, are general commercial.
But Chris, just to clarify, at this point in time, general commercial does not include the retail that's kind of in contention, correct?
To the individuals, like I said, as I pointed out earlier, to half of the businesses in the downtown, the Antique, Bauman's, Silver Spider, Scarlet Boutique, the pharmacy, technically.
Specialty retail.
What's that?
Specialty retail.
Specialty retail would not be allowed out here, but all of the other uses that I talked about would be allowed out here.
Yep.
So I think I want to be clear that some of those businesses would be protected under the current zoning, not necessarily the current plan, but the current zoning.
Right.
But this area is all set out to be commercial. So
what would be allowed? Would be drugstores or what would be allowed under the current plan?
So under the current plan, you could build a 40,000 square foot grocery store that had 10,000 of square feet of non-food sales. And that 10,000 square feet of non-food sales could be anything from a pharmacy to clothing. I can't stop that. Does that make sense? Restaurants, banks, there's a lot of commercial uses that are allowed out there. And there are these little windows that our current zoning code leaves open that make me nervous. Because I've seen those large developers that have lots of money exploit those little windows. So what I was talking about before, are you seeing the 4 boxes here?
4 blobs. Yeah.
Yes.
4 blobs. So this is what, when we went through all of that, this is what I was referring to before, where I said the population that came, there were a number of people that spoke to retail. This is what they said they didn't want: big box stores and lack of design, Walmart, heavy industrial. Big dream for the corridor would be growth, and then some of the big fears: hurt local businesses. So that's what the plan was intended to do. So with that, this is the current land use plan. So that general commercial area has been shrunk quite a bit. And Stan, you were talking about the ag residential tourism. That's this area along the Highway 1 corridor. And then there's a lot more ag / open space that's allowed in there. So this is what it's gone. It went from those more generalities to this plan itself.
Well, I am glad to know what was allowed and to be more clear on what's going to be allowed. But I also wanted to say, because of our zoning over the past 50 years, I think we have a downtown and a town that's really working. Our Main Street is so interesting. We keep getting awards. This is one of the best small towns anywhere. That's important. I mean, if it's not broke, maybe we don't have to fix it. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I don't think that people move to Mount Vernon. I think they moved to Mount Vernon because they like the looks of it, they like the feel of it, they like the schools, they like the artists that we have here. I'm not sure they move here in order to shop. And if they wanted to shop, they might move somewhere else, and I bet those people do. So I guess one of the people who thinks what we have is really good, and that our goal should be to first build on what we have, to protect what we have, and the people who have worked to give us what we have, and to build from there. So thank you for this little bit of time, and thank you, Chris, for enlightening me about the 2016 plan.
This is Valerie Smith. Can I make a comment, Chris?
Yes.
I just want to say thank you, Jackie, for saying that. You know, my husband has put his whole life into Main Street, and we both have. And this year alone, we're no longer business owners, but we're still a building owner on Main Street. And we did get some grant money, but this old building, we're putting $50,000 to $60,000 out of our own pocket just this year. They're very expensive to keep up. I think this is just the worst time to do this to people on Main Street because of all that's been going on, let alone, you know, people that were struggling with sales online as it is. I think people don't feel supported. I know I don't, because how can you expect people to invest that kind of money on Main Street when you don't even feel like the leadership of this town is supporting you? They're looking for something brighter and newer, and you know, the people on the highway, we don't know if they'll come downtown. And my point is, you know, it might work. Yeah, it might work, but what if it doesn't? And are we going to take our chance with all that we have invested sticking around to see if it works or not? I don't think so. I mean, that's the kind of dilemma people that own the buildings and businesses on Main Street are thinking. Like, you know, should we wait around and see if our building value drops? I mean, we're put in a sticky predicament here. And I'm really sad. I'm really sad that the council isn't understanding why this is just the wrong time to do this to people on Main Street. That's all I have to say.
I'm going to add, it's Tommy here, just real quickly to that. It occurs to me, in the 16 years that Fuel has been in business, I've probably had at least a dozen offers to either relocate or to open a second business. And I've had the ability also at times in my life to do that. And at other times, no. But I don't entertain that thought. I never have before, because I love Mount Vernon. And for the first time ever, in 16 years, I can't say I'm entertaining it, but this really makes me question some of the offers that have come my way.
Can I say something about that? And thank you, Tommy. And I wanted to bring up Tommy's question from last week at the Burrish Center about are there any towns where this kind of plan has actually worked. I grew up in Delhi, which is near Manchester, and when Walmart came to Manchester, it was decimated. I think they're making tiny baby steps back now, but that was 30 some years ago, maybe 40. And of course, we know about Annosa also and other places. But when COVID started, my dad, who is my bookkeeper, pointed out to me that I would have to close one of my 2 businesses in order to save one of them. So it was like Sophie's choice. And I debated long and hard, pros and cons, Iowa City, Mount Vernon. And of course, I love Mount Vernon, and this is my original location, and my store will turn 20 on November 7th. And I live a block away, and so there are a lot of wonderful factors, including the incredible people and customers here. But I kind of felt like I had been knocked out of my sales a couple weeks ago when this came up, because I will admit I've been busy. I did not read all the stuff in the paper, but after COVID and after derecho and after the incredible loss of business, you know, to have another yet, you know, down the road possible factor that would impact my ability to make a living here. And I, you know, want to stay here. I plan to stay here. I don't have any plans to relocate back to Iowa City, but I did leave the door open if there was ever a situation where, God forbid, the building burned down or something major happened. So I just want to put that out there that I am very much opposed to having retail out there. And I am not opposed to progress. I'm not opposed to other things that, you know, would contribute to the long-term financial stability of the community. But I don't see a situation where retail would make improvements on Mount Vernon, on the highway, retail on the highway. That's it.
Chris, Barb again.
What's that?
Is it possible to perhaps have a committee form? This is hypothetical. Have a committee form that decides what businesses we want out there, and then craft the zoning laws so that we can protect what we want and protect what we have. Is there a way to do that so you can kind of micromanage your area instead of just generalizing it?
Yes and no. Yes, in the way that, you know, depending on how you word your zoning code, our zoning code would have to change a little bit in order to make that happen. What I can do is, as a city, we can zone uses, not individual businesses, but like uses. So, not to the, I mean, we can't get to the specific point of saying we don't want a Tractor Supply. We can get to a point that says the use that would make a Tractor Supply an allowable use, we can not allow it out there.
Right.
So there, I don't want to say that I can come up with a way that legally would allow you to go through and eliminate individual businesses, but groups of businesses possibly.
So perhaps if we took a pause here and looked at this from a different angle, perhaps we could create a plan that would work for the community, where we could more or less design the area with the types, whether it's restaurants or doctor's offices or whatever. I don't really know, but my concern here is that people think this is only for the business owners that we're arguing or discussing this situation. And the reality is, I've lived here my entire life. And this is an exceptional town, and I hear it from people, and I don't have a business. I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just a concerned citizen and somebody who has watched our town develop. And I don't want to see mistakes made that can't be corrected. And so I feel like we need to really think this through carefully. You know, I was one of the big advocates for making sure we kept Press Hill open. So I'm kind of one of these people that just liked a lot of the things the way they were, but I also see progress being necessary. But maybe we need to micromanage it a little bit more than we are right now.
So,
Just a thought.
and if I can, I want to preface that with the individual uses that we're talking about now, basically the retail that that you had just mentioned, it's a little bit more difficult to walk back uses that have been allowed in the past. So I would not advocate, obviously, if we decided to make more changes than the retail that we've been talking about tonight, because it complicates the businesses that are out there already. Does that make sense?
Well, yes and no, because weren't those grandfathered in? And now we're talking about new property out there.
No. So this is the challenge. There is no way to grandfather them in for the life of the business. Grandfather.
Are we talking about the same thing? Are we talking about Gary's and the bank and places like that? What are we talking here specifically, Chris?
What I'm saying is those individual businesses and those uses that were allowed out there up until this point would be harder to walk back. Gary's is an allowable use. It's not grandfathered in out there. The banks are allowed right now.
Right, but are we trying to take away what we have, or are we trying to protect what's coming? I mean, I guess I don't understand the way it works.
So when you said get specific with uses that are allowed in a zoning district, I wouldn't be an advocate for walking back the businesses that are already allowed out there. I think the conversation would start with the businesses that are on here tonight. So I think we're kind of saying the same thing, Barb. I hope we're saying the same.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that, you know, as far as banks being allowed, grocery stores being allowed, I wouldn't want to try and walk those back because it brings up a whole nother legal set of arguments and it gets complicated.
Right, and that might be what I'm not understanding, but because I don't think anybody has a gripe with what's out there right now. You know, and to expand maybe on what we have out there, whether it be restaurants or I'm sure there'll be another gas station going in closer to the bypass. I mean, there's some things that are kind of given.
Yeah, I mean,
but and maybe the city needs to think about annexation, because the reality is what you said earlier is there are a lot of or not a lot. There are owners of that property. We're not the owners of it. And so those farmers can sell that ground to their highest bidder, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I would actually advocate against annexation to my last bone in my body right now, because it gets costly for the city. But here's the bottom line, and I'm trying not to oversimplify it, but the question right now that is in front of the council is, do you allow for expanded retail use in this area or do you not? Now, when I was asked the question before, I said, yes, I made the recommendation, and I'm just doing it on a staff looking at the entire community. I don't make the final call. The council gets to make that decision for a very good reason. If the council decides to not allow expanded retail uses out there, we can still adopt the plan and keep all of the design standards in there without those expanded uses. It just changes the ordinance that we would adopt after this point. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I make a recommendation based upon my experience. That's it. So when I answer your questions tonight, I don't want you to take that I'm advocating one way or the other. I am simply saying, based upon my professional background, I would recommend that it's in there. If you choose not to, that's okay as well.
So if we didn't have the expanded retail use, if I'm not sure, I can't see your map because I couldn't get onto the visual conference. What do we have right now that they would be deciding whether to expand it or not?
So really I think what we're talking about, if you were to look at the businesses downtown, that would be affected by the plan that is currently written, it would be Silver Spider, Bauman's, all of the antique businesses, Scarlet Boutique, and potentially Ace Hardware. Oh, and the pharmacy. I think
Iron Leaf Press.
not exactly. So Iron Leaf Press, because they manufacture as well as retail, is actually set in a different category. That's a difficulty that we have with the zoning. So, I mean, Iron Leaf Press could possibly be outside. I can't say without going back and looking at the document, but they are categorized a little bit different because they're not 100% retail. And there is custom manufacturing is allowed outside of the downtown. That definition is about a paragraph long, so you can kind of get an idea of what's all in there. But those businesses with the plan that is written today would either be allowed now to go out to that area or have competitors come in for sure. I mean, that is the way that it is. If you take certain lines out of there, then yes, you could keep those types of businesses from moving into the bypass area, and you could still approve the plan. You're just talking about uses that are allowed in general areas are not. So that little P or the C, I mean, you can make changes in that table and take uses back out.
I can speak up, Chris, if no one else has anything right at this minute. Don't want to change the subject.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't speak up a little earlier, but as one of the businesses who would be potentially directly impacted, I just want to reiterate what Tommy said, that it's not about protecting just Bauman's as an individual. Now, as a business owner, I am 100% concerned about a competitor going out there that would make me lose income as a business owner. One thing I know you and I discussed, Chris, is like a farm supply store, a tractor supply store. That would compete directly with Bauman's. We sell workwear, we sell work boots, we sell sportwear, we sell underwear, we sell socks, all of that competes with it. We could potentially lose almost a third of our income if that type of store came to town. Now, I think that Josh and I are hopefully creative enough that we'll pivot, but no way am I going to compete with a business like that and try to stock the same things, because there's no way I can compete with the prices. But ultimately, what I'm most concerned with as a citizen and as a business owner is that our main street as a whole could be harmed, because, my business is partially successful because Tommy sends people to me and sends people over to me. When people are Christmas shopping, they're looking for kids' toys. They say, hey, you should go check out Silver Spider. She's right across the street. We all help each other be more successful on Main Street. And I'm just concerned, because it was brought up at the last meeting that, essentially there's the possibility of creating a second retail district over there. And I just find that really concerning as a citizen and as a business owner, because I don't think that Mount Vernon can support 2 retail districts. I just don't see how it's going to happen, and I just don't understand it. So I'm concerned on that front. I lost my train of thought for a second. What else?
Well, I think the other thing too, this is Josh. I think the other thing here that's difficult for us, and to go along with Mike and Val and other points, is you know, we have, along with a lot of other people, invested a significant amount of money. And I can say for us in particular, we've now owned the store for a year and a half, and I've not taken a dime out of the business, because every bit of money, profit we make, we've invested back into the business to do things to meet things that we believe we can sell. Now, so for example, our shoe inventory is 5 times what it was when we first got involved with the store, and different areas of the store that we've tried to improve on. And so that's the frustration, is that you know, we are putting our money where our mouth is, and also, you know, 70% of our business for Bauman's comes from out of town. And so, you know, I just wonder, will we truly change people's buying habits if they're not shopping in town with what we already offer, when we have so many people that find our store desirable from 60 miles away? Then will it change?
And I guess what I'll just kind of leave it with is, you know, if I was someone in Mount Vernon that did not own a business and didn't really have a stake in this game, I'd be concerned when I hear so many people that are business owners or building owners have made it some kind of investment in our Main Street. We've heard a lot of people speak up saying, hey, I'm concerned as someone who actually has real money at stake on our Main Street. And as someone, you know, if I was to step back, not as a business owner, I would just be concerned to hear those people speak up. So I'm just hoping that our council members, you know, hear our concerns and realize, you know, these people have invested a lot in Mount Vernon. And, you know, I just think we need to take our opinions into consideration. I just hope that the council members kind of consider that, listen to these videos, listen to the recording from the last one. I really hope that they hear what everyone has to say.
So I can tell you that they did receive and watch, because I've had questions from the last video. So I want to let people know. And Olivia, I mean, you were the first person that reached out to me and asked. Actually, Josh was, but you were the first person I saw in person. So I want you to understand that the reason for this is not for me to argue the merits for and against the plan. It's for you to have an opportunity to do exactly what you just did and present that statement to the city council, which they're going to hear. And I think that therein lies the importance. So they are hearing directly from you. And why, when I talked to Tommy the first time, I was elated that we did take a pause so that we could hold these 2 meetings, and why I've allotted 3-hour sessions to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak, because those are the types of things, when I say the reason for those decisions getting made at the council level are important, because to a certain extent it's a political decision. There are weighing different opinions, and you're absolutely right. If they only hear opinions from one side or on one side, it's very easy to make a decision based upon those opinions. So this is an opportunity. And again, if you don't feel comfortable speaking in this setting, I would encourage you to either email the council members directly or submit an email to me, and I will submit it to the council. I have one daughter that graduated. I have a son that's a freshman and another that is in 3rd grade. I want all of my children to graduate from the same school. So I as well plan to live and stay in Mount Vernon as long as you'll allow me. Again, going back to what you previously said, those are the things that they need to hear.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, I know not everyone was at the meeting last time, but one thing that we discussed at the meeting last time is that, you know, and I think you maybe said it, that it was probably unlikely for specialty retail to go out on the highway. You said it's probably much more likely for, you know, highway oriented retail, hotels, gas stations, that type of stuff. So I know that was one comment that we brought that I thought was kind of important, that, you know, I just kind of said, you know, if it is unlikely for that type of retail to go out there, why do we even allow it at this point in time if it's not a likely scenario? you know,
Yeah.
why include it?
So the challenge for me, and this is the challenge that I have in everything I do, I'm trying to look out 20 years, and everybody on here, I've never been a retail owner, but I have, like I said, dealt with retail from the time that I started it in the public sector. You know, a lot has changed, and it's an ever evolving battle that I know that you face if you own a retail shop. So that's the struggle that we have trying to predict the next 20 years. How much population growth are we going to have? What pressures? How much commercial area do we actually need? To a certain extent, why we contracted what was done with the previous plan in general is we knew that was too much. I mean, Mount Vernon would have to be 10,000 people for all of that square footage to be needed. And so it takes, I think, into account a lot of good opinions, and it makes strides. But again, I would encourage you to make those opinions known to the council. And if, like I said, if they choose to pull that out, they still can do that. So I like I said, I mean, my goal here is to give everybody a platform to make these, and to Mike's comment earlier, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I tend to, you know, at some point in my career, I'm going to offend one side or the other by comments that I make. I'm not attempting to do that, and I'm not attempting to sway the decisions. I make a recommendation based upon my profession, and you are going to make a recommendation based upon your livelihood. And as I told you in the store, that's okay. I would totally expect that and encourage it. You have a stake in your downtown business, and I would express that to the council. This is a platform to do that.
Chris, what is our time frame?
So, Susan, what I said at the beginning was I'm hoping that they won't take this back up until November, because we have a goal setting session scheduled for the 15th or the 19th. Hold on just a second. I got to check my calendar. So the next council meeting is on the 19th. We are having an outside consultant come in to run a goal setting session for the next 2 years. I would really love not to muddy these two. I think they're both very important to the city, so I don't necessarily want to have them on the same night. I have asked the council to consider waiting to have their public hearing until November 2nd. They could have the public hearing, Susan, and still table it and take more discussion. I mean, they could do a number of things, but I'm hoping November 2nd would be the first opportunity in which they would take this off the table and have a public hearing.
Okay, Chris, that wasn't my question, but my question is, so if they changed the proposal to something that our Uptown felt more comfortable with and more secure with, then in 10 years, if things change, and you can always go back and change that, right?
Yes. As an example, the 2016 plan that was put together is about half done. It's not going to make it 15 to 20 years. So, I mean, chances are more likely that we're going to have to go back through this process, and Judy's giving me that look like, are you kidding me? But yeah, I mean, here's what I tell people. You don't want to make changes to these plans yearly. You want to take the time that you wouldn't necessarily have to do this every other year, because at that point, they're no longer a plan and you're reacting to every little thing that's coming across your desk. What you do want to try and do is get like a 5 to 10 year snapshot. And again, as I stated with Olivia, things change. I mean, I think everybody on here can agree that from my childhood to where I'm at today, there are different businesses, there are different expectations. My kids do things a lot differently than I did, growing up. So they're supposed to be our best look out for that 15 to 20 years. We will have to make changes to it, Susan, regardless, probably in years 6, 7, and 8.
So then it wouldn't be a big deal to change that to make everyone comfortable now, because we don't have a need for a second retail center. And so instead we could concentrate on our current retail center, maybe even expand that some. I mean, I still don't understand why we can't move City Hall out to the new police station, since that is so ginormous. And then that would leave a area to be developed for new retail uptown.
So the building is big, but if you go out there and take a tour, the square footage, that's a whole nother conversation I would love to have with you outside of this, but I don't foresee, the one thing that I will tell you is Main Street really desires a City Hall presence on Main Street in order to maintain the Main Street. I would hate to move it out there, to be honest with you. But we can talk about that on another occasion.
Well, at least the police, the old firehouse and stuff like that, that could be developed. And
correct. And, that conversation will be forthcoming again. Probably should have occurred this month. However, derecho and COVID has kind of put an extremely different time frame on things. And I've made this a comment to a number of people. When we started this process 2.5 years ago, nobody was going to ever predict that we would be dealing with COVID or derecho. So one thing that I forget who said it, from a timing perspective, I'm very respectful of that. I know where most of you sit. I made the comment at the last meeting that when the council put the $125,000 into local businesses, I got to read all of those applications. So I really do understand what everybody's going through. And they could choose to push this off and still adopt the plan. It's not an all or nothing type situation.
Hey, Chris, just a quick question. So out on the bypass, service businesses would be allowed out there, right?
Under general commercial today?
Yep.
Yes.
So is there the potential, I'm just thinking, like maybe some spaces would open on Main Street if some of the service businesses that are on Main Street decided to go out there. There could be openings on Main Street because of that, correct?
Could.
Because I just think that is something, kind of going off what Susan said, is there's probably is some room for more retail on Main Street depending on how things might change as years come.
Yeah, again, I have watched businesses in the downtown change. I commend Mike and Valerie and Josh and Olivia for the length, especially with a clothing retail. It's hard. And like I said, a lot of things have changed over the course of even my 20-year career. So there's a lot that could happen. To answer your question, Olivia, a lot could happen. I mean, that's why I don't work in definitives. I know that I can't control everything and things will happen beyond my control. What I can tell you, from a legal perspective, what I pushed and what started this whole plan was wanting the Highway 1, Highway 30 corridor to not look like the rest of the cities in Iowa. I wanted to make sure that if people were going to develop in Mount Vernon, they were going to have to respect what we believe in. And if they don't want to, they don't have to. That also gives the council the ability to be specific with economic development incentives should they ever choose to give any. If a business that we're going to bring, say 100 jobs came in and said, we can't necessarily afford that, well, that's where the city can step in and offer incentives. So I like to have as much control in our hands as possible. And right now, I can tell you we don't have it. To some extent, I would love to see at least 90% of this plan get adopted sooner rather than later, just because I know I'm going to get pressure from the bypass.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think that the probably less than 5% that we're talking about right now is the part that is the big question. I think that's the big question with everybody here tonight. And again, why they need to hear from you directly.
Can I ask, it's Tommy, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Trudy?
Yes.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank you so much because I haven't had an opportunity for trying really hard to protect us. I'm wondering if you could share with us what moved you to do that. And I know the vote was very close. What your motive was.
Thank you, Tommy. And I know this is a heart-wrenching issue. And I don't think I'm being over dramatic by saying that, especially when you make your comments. I've always, living in the community, I have been aware of the conversations about retail out. It used to be Highway 30 or now Business 30, and then what would be out on the bypass. And so I was very, I was concerned about that. But backing up a minute, I went through, I think Confluence did an excellent job. I'm glad that the city hired Confluence to look at the area. As you can see from the first zoning, the actual zoning, the way it's zoned right now is pretty sparse, and then put the overlay on it. And there's some objections to overlays, but I think it gets more definitive. But one of the things specific is what's good about the whole plan is that it develops design standards. And that gets to be what Chris is talking about, saying that we want to be able to have our the approach to Mount Vernon look like looks like some place that somebody wants to exit and take a look at. What I was concerned about is pretty straightforward. At least on my copy, it was on page 86, and I was quoted in the paper as saying page 86, and that's what it looked like. One parcel in there where it talked about clothing stores and it talked about drugstores and so forth. And I have visited over the years with different people uptown and realized, I thought I knew what they were concerned about. And obviously a clothing store would be a direct competition with Bauman's, and that would bother me. There are all the other places that you talked about as far as specialty stores. If anything happened out there, they would be in direct competition. So I was concerned about that. So I don't want to make this too long, but basically I like the plan because it talks about design standards and it develops a plan. I think that the specifics, and if the council would be willing to look at the specific definition of what would go out there and it's just in that one area too, isn't it, Chris? It's called the mixed.
Yeah, I showed them earlier, Trudy. It's yeah. So page 86, the one line that you were referring to, I showed them that.
Okay. Well, I apologize for not coming in.
No, you're good. You're good.
Anyway, so all that saying is that Yes, I think that one section that is on the overlay, I am concerned that there would be some conflicts with Uptown. I think we have to also realize that in general, the word retail gets to be a little fuzzy. You know, what exactly are we talking about retail? And that's why I liked looking at those definitions, saying, okay, I don't want a clothing store out there to compete with business. I would really love to have another full pharmacy and drugstore with retail up on Main Street. And I hope that could happen at some point. So I'm fumbling here, but my point is that there are some very good things about the plan. And I think the company the Confluence did a great job of presenting it to us. And but I do have that's why I couldn't vote for it to be approved, is because I was concerned about what the existing retail uptown, if it would go out into that area. We also, as this is just another thought, and we've also talked about this at P&Z, we have to be able to, the housing is another big issue that I have that would like to be developed out there. But then we have to get our wayfinding signs to downtown from the bypass, and we have to get whether it be bike paths or walkways or whatever, we have to get people from that area to uptown. So I apologize, Tommy, I'm kind of fumbling, but that was the primary concern, is that I did not want to see a conflict, and I thought that one section would help us and not have a conflict with the retail uptown.
And thank you. And that's, you know, my whole motive for being here tonight and the other night is all about that. I realize, you know, that there's the general retail, but it's about protecting what we can. And we have the opportunity to do that, you know, for ACE, for the pharmacy, for Bauman's. You know, we have the opportunity to omit that by way of your bringing it to light. And I just don't understand why we wouldn't choose to protect the people that we can. There's going to be plenty of retail out there regardless. I mean, I understand that. This is not about no retail. Mm-hmm. It's about protecting the people that have given us so much. I can't wrap my head around it. Thanks, Trudy.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
Chris, how I'm afraid that people are going to think this is going to be more like an ordinance where there are multiple votes on it, multiple readings, and, you know, open for more discussion. How can we make sure that the citizens of Mount Vernon understand that this is all going to be decided in one city council meeting with one vote?
Well, again, I always attempt to do this so that it makes the paper and gets people talking. I would encourage you to share this on Facebook. I would encourage people to reach out to me. This is how this process works. Is the plan itself, as I stated at the first meeting, is consider it your policy paper. It establishes what you would like to see and the policies moving forward. And then the ordinance that would get adopted after the fact is the laws that are created out of that policy statement. So fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, the requirements by state law for the policy statement are one meeting. So one public hearing, one meeting. Laws are supposed to require 3 readings. There's ways around that, but typically they go through 3 readings, 3 meetings. Most of that is established by state law. So I would, like I said, the reason I'm doing this is I'm hoping people share this. I know that I was on Facebook Live at the last session. So again, the whole point, I think, in having all of this is to get the word out as much as possible. Outside of me just walking down the street and saying this is only a 1 meeting deal, this is the best that I can come up with right now.
Is there a way that perhaps the businesses could get notification? Because I don't think I got notification for either of these meetings. I mean, it was on Facebook, so that was by chance. Is there a way that like a quick memo, I mean, it wouldn't have to be much, could go to all of the businesses? We have business owners and building owners. It should be both, really.
So,
Is there a way to do that in town here? I mean, it seems like there would be some kind of communications.
so the way that I typically do that, Denise, is reach out either through Joe at CDG when I'm trying to get notification out to the businesses that I think that are going to affect, or um, through Facebook or one of the business owners. I tend to find that if I can get Andrea on board, she can get the information out there rather quickly. But here's the trick with that, to be honest with you, Denise. So I have very specific requirements when it comes to public hearings and notifications. So if I were to notify the downtown businesses direct, I would have to send a mailing to the entire community, because everybody in the community has the ability to come to that public hearing. Does that make sense? I have to treat everybody the same way.
Right.
So,
No, I agree. Yeah, and you
um,
do that partially by putting it in the paper,
yeah.
but
So the
where
way that
it's
I
something
get,
like this.
to a certain extent, the way that I get around that is I call it slow playing. I try to slow play these conversations so that it does get in the paper and word of mouth does get around and we can see the reaction. In some instances, like this, word of mouth goes very quickly and we're having these discussions like we are tonight. In other instances, it'll get in the paper and then I won't hear anything from anybody unless it affects them directly. But I will tell you, right now the public hearing has been tabled, and I am encouraging everyone to watch for the paper, because I believe the council will, again, hopefully respect not doing both of those items on the same night. And the first chance or opportunity they would have would be November 2nd.
Chris, Josh Randall here.
Yes.
First of all, as we did last time, I do thank you, Olivia and I thank you for doing these meetings, because they have been helpful. You've provided a lot of documentation. You've spent a lot of time on the Bauman's phone line or in the Bauman's store, so I appreciate that. One question I have for clarification for people listening: could the plan be passed without the language that is in contradiction to current planning and zoning, essentially the definition of general commercial? Could it be passed excluding that language?
Oh, absolutely.
Because really what we're talking about is changing current planning and zoning laws, changing the definition of general commercial, essentially. Is that fair? Or?
So, yes, they can get the plan and they can strike through portions of that plan and adopt everything so I guess the buck stops at the council. So when it gets to the council level, they can strike through and adopt whatever they choose to at that point. At the planning commission level, they can just make recommendations. So like in Trudy's instance, she makes a motion saying, I want to approve the plan minus this language. And that's how it gets worded to the council: is the recommendation from planning commission is to adopt the plan with minus this information. When the council actually gets it, they direct us to say, we want to approve the plan striking this language. And then we send that back to the consultant and they put the new document together minus that information. So yes, long-winded answer to your question, they can adopt the plan minus language that's in there currently if they choose to take some of that out.
And then I think it's important for maybe those who are so confused that it is a change to general commercial as it is right now.
That portion of the retail is a change from what has been done in the past. Yes.
So I just think it's important. It seems like that's a point that some people maybe are confused on. And I think it's just an important point to get across.
Yes. So when I made the comment before, the 50%. The original letter that went out that was coming from the council, which by the way, that's okay, but like a mass email that says the same thing doesn't do or doesn't have the same effect as to what's going on here tonight. Just kind of for future clarification. Not that they're meaningless, it just, these personal stories, I think, mean more to the council than just a mass form letter that goes out, similar to what I'm seeing in my mailbox every day. So I think when I was trying to make that point, I just wanted to clarify that original letter made some statements that weren't 100% factual. So I just wanted to clarify those. So yes, for 50% of the businesses in the downtown, and I use 50% only because that's what I can think in my head. It might be more square footage than that, but for those individuals, this would be moving in a different direction. For the other 50%, you know, the restaurants and things like that, banks, they've always had that opportunity to be out there. In the
Well, and I was thinking more as Mount Vernon as a whole. It's a change for the community of Mount Vernon as their current zoning is. Not necessarily just for me, but just in general, it's changing what the community has normally had for zoning ordinances for general commercial.
Under general commercial, yes. That particular portion of the retail, that 50% would be a change in general.
Yep.
Yes.
Is that because of the language that's in pages 83 through 86
Correct.
or 87? That's different than the current
So if you can
regulation.
imagine what this is I call it like making your bed. So your mattress is the underlying zoning district and it doesn't go anywhere, right? And then the sheets that go on top would be this overlay. So this overlay that we create, the laws that we create under this bypass are considered an overlay. So there's still base regulations, and then there's more regulations on top specifically to this corridor.
So, but the overlay takes precedent over what's underneath it, right?
It makes it not necessarily, Trudy, but it does make it much more difficult in the court of law to go the other direction. Okay. So what it's basically saying is you can't in one breath say that this is okay, and then because we've used it tonight, Walmart comes in and you say, we don't like Walmart, we're not letting you come in even though it meets all of these regulations. We can't do that legally. We can control uses, but we can't control individual businesses. It's kind of like signs. We can height, size, colors, we can control that, but we can't control content as a governing body.
So what I was concerned, conflicting with the businesses uptown directly, and the boutique stores. We talked about in P&Z the boutique stores for example, Target and Walmart for the larger places. We have zoning laws, our zoning criteria excludes those large big box stores because of square footage requirements out there or limitations out there. But so I understand, I've not been there, but I understand there's a Target boutique in downtown Iowa City right now, and where the Brown Bottle used to be. So it's those, and there's all sorts of rationale that that wouldn't be good marketing for Target or Walmart to build out on our bypass because they're so near Anamosa or Cedar Rapids. But that's the kind of thing that I was objecting to also.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just another thing kind of for clarification. So from thinking of the overlays and thinking of how it's difficult, or we talked of in our first meeting about the legalities of going backwards. So it would be safer if we to keep general commercial defined as it is, and you could always add to change that, to expand retail But in terms of walking that backwards, if we found out that that wasn't working, that would be more difficult legally to
Yes.
support.
Correct. It's always challenging for the cities or governing bodies to go backwards, because then they have to justify to the court why they did. And it usually takes something monumental to make that happen. For instance, it would have to mean that it was by a river and all of a sudden the floodplain changed, and that would justify going the other direction. If everything stays the same, walking things backwards as a governing body is always difficult.
Thank you.
I've got to go. See everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Trudy.
So just to ask to be clear here, so talking to our city council, asking for no decision to be made until November, and then asking for certain line items to be struck from pages 83 to 86 are the most effective steps to take right now?
Yes. Very much so. I don't know that you will have to push too hard on the November thing. I'm going to kind of continue to remind them that these two items are extremely vital to how Mount Vernon moves forward in the future. So I hate to have them both on the same night and have one take from the other. So goal setting, because we have an outside consultant already coming in and scheduled for that meeting in October, I'm kind of hoping that they'll leave that one in place and then move this over. If that were to change, if there's not enough support and they want to hold both of them, I would get the information out.
Wouldn't the goal setting be affected by the citizen input, though, that would come up in the second meeting? Shouldn't it be flipped the other way around?
Not necessarily. So the goal setting is a 2-year window, and it's more for project-based. Here's what we've done from a project specific. So infrastructure, it's more a to-do list than it is kind of the grand scheme of things of a plan. I would prefer and I would encourage anybody to come to the goal setting. But that has more to do with, do we have to make changes to Highway 30 from infrastructure? Do we need a new overlay? I mean, plan specific, if that makes sense. They're really not one and the same at all. They're just kind of two different documents, but I feel like they're both very important because the goal setting kind of dictates where we're spending our money for the next couple of years. So I know I've lost about 10 people, and I didn't even realize that I had scheduled this for the vice presidential debate, so I apologize for that. Here's what I would put out, and I put this out there at the last meeting too. Outside of tomorrow and Friday, because I'm taking a couple days off, I am more than happy to meet with people individually. I can come to your business. You can come to City Hall if you want to talk more to me one-on-one and get questions answered. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to city council members, at least by email, and tell your personal stories. They're very much more effective than like I said, a form letter. If you can't find that information, of course, my email is right on the front page of the city website. You can always send it to me and I disperse it as soon as I get it as well. So any other questions tonight? Comments?
No, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking these 6 hours and for giving us a chance to pause and communicate with one another and educate one another and learn from you and one another. It's been really, really helpful and meaningful. Thank you.
So this is the most enjoyable part of my job. I just wish this would happen about at every meeting. Doesn't happen that way, but it's not necessarily fun to talk about all the time. But I appreciate everybody taking the time as well. The hardest part for a staff person is for things like this to feel like it's just staff driven, because that's never the intent with any of these documents. We do a lion's share of the legwork as far as information and putting our opinions in front of people, decision makers. But at the end of the day, this is for everybody that lives in Mount Vernon. And it shouldn't just be something that we pushed or one person pushed. The more people that get involved, the better the plan is.
Yeah, and we want to say thank you as well, Chris. I mean, really, we can't say enough how much we appreciate it, and also how much we appreciate the community members that have come to both of these forums as, you know, in support of the Main Street businesses. And, you know, it means a lot to us, but we really appreciate all the time you've taken with us.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
I've enjoyed it. I always enjoy my debates with Stan too. I know it sounds like we get heated at each other, but that's usually how we talk to one another.
I got to look up the word snippy as soon as we get done.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. I mean, it really does mean a lot.
Absolutely.
I feel like we're being heard too. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I like the fact that I can record all of this and they can watch it. You know, I want to make sure that all the voices get heard and yeah, we'll just see how it goes.
I know I told you last time, make sure to tell them that it got really entertaining right at the end, so they've got to listen to the whole entire thing.
Yeah, that's right.
I will say this. I do want to say that regardless.
Let's not overplay it, Olivia. I've been here.
We do have, you know, I have been a part of 5 different communities and countless city councils. This council that we have right now is the most in tune that I have ever come across. So, you know, at the end of the day, they are going to take all of these comments into account. I can't say which way they're going to go, but I do believe that they will take all of your opinions to heart in making their decisions. I've had a lot of councils in the past that would have just said, you didn't come to the initial meeting, so tough luck. And that's really, I mean, that's unfortunate. And so I'm thankful for the council pausing and saying, yeah, go ahead and do this. Because they didn't necessarily have to do that either.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. If there isn't anything else, I appreciate everybody. Again, call me, text me if I'm walking by, drag me into your store if you want. Otherwise, thank you, everyone, and I'm sure we'll be seeing each other soon.
Nice, thank you.
Good night.
Good night.